Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case. In many popular romantic comedies, we often see the main character chasing after the girl he likes. He might even follow her around and not take no for an answer. In these movies, it usually ends with the girl falling in love with him, realizing that he loves her more than anyone else. It seems cute and funny on screen, and the guy looks like a true romantic. But in real life, this kind of behavior is not charming at all. It can actually scare the person away and might even make them call the police. What seems romantic in movies can be very different and creepy in reality. Celeste Manno's story began quite harmlessly. She was receiving attentions from a work colleague, which she consistently ignored. She sincerely hoped that her admirer would soon understand and just leave her alone. However, just one careless action by Celeste drastically changed the situation, turning the suitor into an obsessed pursuer. Another thoughtless act led to irreversible consequences. The young woman was genuinely fearful for her life, repeatedly sought police assistance, and confessed to friends that she sensed trouble but felt powerless and unsupported by anyone. It's likely the tragedy could have been avoided had law enforcement not operated on the principle of "come to us when the crime has been committed." Now, let's carefully examine this case and trace the chain of events that led to the tragic demise of this beautiful young woman. Who was Celeste Manno? Celeste Cristano was born on November 30th, 1997, in the northeastern part of Melbourne, in the Australian state of Victoria. She was the youngest of two children to parents Eggy Dearo and Tony Manno. She grew up alongside her older brother named Alessandro. According to some information, the family patriarch left his wife when the children were still small and soon remarried. But he always maintained contact with his older offspring, supported them financially, and tried to be actively involved in their lives. During her school years, Celeste was quite sociable, active, and friendly. She engaged in sports and dance, served as the captain of the cheerleading team, and had big plans for her future. Initially, she dreamed of becoming a lawyer and enrolled in the prestigious University of Melbourne, where she studied criminal and civil law. However, towards the end of her studies, she decided law was dull, started studying advertising and marketing, and in 2018 was hired by a large and rapidly growing company that sold various goods on e-commerce platforms. Smart and talented, Celeste quickly grasped everything on the fly, successfully fulfilled her duties, and rapidly ascended the career ladder. She went from a simple call center worker to the head of an entire department in less than a couple of years, and was considered one of the most promising employees. Everyone admired her intelligence, initiative, and ability to organize work rationally and competently. Moreover, Celeste possessed outstanding external attributes and a flawless figure. During her university years, she even participated in the university beauty contest and was among the top 3 leaders. She always had a multitude of admirers, so from a young age, she was used to significant male attention, but was very meticulous in choosing partners. The persistent colleague alongside Manno, a certain Lou Nader, worked at the company. He was nearly 16 years older than her and showed a lively interest in the new beautiful hire from the very first day she appeared in the office. It's worth noting that Lou was quite reserved and unsociable, and evidently lacked any career ambitions, as he had long occupied the same minor position without any desire for development. Kind, smiling, and open, Celeste did not want to hurt Lou's feelings, so she always politely declined whenever he tried to ask her out. However, the man repeatedly tried to draw her attention in various ways. Sometimes Celeste would make jokes to lighten the mood, but she was firm in her desire to have nothing to do with him. Louis interpreted this situation as a challenge or a game. He thought that his young boss was simply playing hard to get and decided that he would win her over no matter what. His attentions were very persistent, awkward, and simply annoying, but Celeste tried to keep her composure and hoped that he would soon give up or shift his attention to someone else. As time passed, Lou remained relentless. He became literally obsessed with the young beauty, and everyone around noticed it. One day, Manno confided in a close friend and colleague that she would never even consider a relationship with Lou. First, He was odd and entirely unpredictable. Second, she was never attracted to men without ambitions and life goals. Third, the significant age difference also played a role. However, she felt pity for her admirer, as despite all his efforts, he stood no chance. In his fruitless attempts to win the attention and affection of his colleague, Lou completely forgot about his own work duties. He had never been a particularly diligent worker, but now he simply stopped performing his direct functions. His productivity plummeted, and the senior management was dissatisfied with the situation. Lou received 3 reprimands and warnings, and in early autumn of 2019, the negligent worker was finally dismissed. Lou was very upset by this turn of events, and as he packed his things in the office, it seemed as though he was about to cry. Celeste, meanwhile, experienced mixed feelings. On one hand, she was relieved that the annoying suitor would finally disappear from her life and stop bothering her with his persistent overtures. On the other hand, she felt some guilt, believing that this had happened partly because of her. Manno, as a department manager, thanked the dismissed employee for his years of service, escorted him to the building exit, and on parting, tried to encourage him by patting him on the shoulder and sincerely wishing him luck. However, it soon turned out that this harmless act was a fatal mistake and a catalyst that fueled Lou's belief that they could make it work. Instantly, the man decided that Celeste was simply afraid to start an office romance, as she was his boss, and it could lead to general disapproval and negatively affect her career. Now, in his view, nothing stood in the way of their happiness, and they could be together. Overwhelmed by his feelings, Lou unexpectedly kissed Celeste on the cheek. An awkward pause followed. Stunned by his audacity, Manno was at a loss for how to react, so she simply turned around and hurried back into the office building without saying a word. This reaction convinced Lou once and for all that Celeste had feelings for him, and he should not give up. A few days after being fired, the relentless stalker continued his pursuit, convinced that Celeste's feelings for him were genuine and that he just needed to be persistent. Louis created a social media account, located Celeste's profile, and sent her a friend request. Initially, she accepted it, thinking there was no harm. However, when he began bombarding her with requests to meet and go out together, she tried to politely decline at first, and then simply blocked him. The next day, the former colleague sent her another friend request from a newly created profile. Celeste tried to ignore it, but he started commenting on her photos, praising her looks and figure, and noting how great a couple they would make. She then tried to adjust her profile settings so that no one except friends could send her messages or comment on her photos or posts. A week later, during a family celebration, she complained to her relatives about the persistent pursuer, also recounting that bizarre incident on the day he was fired. Her family listened, but at that time, everyone assumed it was not serious, and the unwanted admirer would soon lose interest and disappear from her life forever. Louis didn't have Celeste's personal phone number during their work together. They only communicated through work channels. But now she began receiving strange romantic messages from an unknown number, and she immediately guessed who they were from. The admirer sent her romantic poems he had written, admired her beauty, and again tried to coax her into going out. Celeste answered the stalker's call only once, attempting to have a serious conversation with him, to explain that nothing could happen between them, and to persuade him to stop pursuing her. However, the man did not listen, and only repeated how pleasant her voice was, and how glad he was that she had finally picked up the phone. After this, she tried to block the pursuer, but he called each time from a new number. Eventually, she decided to change her number, but within a week, Louis somehow found it out, and the telephone harassment continued. For about half a year, Celeste unsuccessfully tried to ignore the crazed admirer. She blocked his numbers and fake social media pages, did not respond to messages, and tried to live her usual life. However, the stream of messages continued, and their nature gradually changed from romantic to bold and threatening. Now the man did not ask. He demanded to meet with her and began detailing his delusional intimate fantasies about what he would do with her right now. But that was not even the worst of it. It turned out the stalker began following her from work to home, learning where she lived. Celeste didn't realize at first that Louis was now present in her life, not just in messages, but was literally trailing her every move. She occasionally glimpsed him near her home, but each time convinced herself it was her imagination, a product of nerves. When the young woman finally realized that she was not mistaken, and that the stalker, with his maniacal obsession, was indeed following her, she decided to seek police protection. Celeste wanted the law enforcement to issue a special order prohibiting the stalker from approaching her and her home. However, the officers were indifferent to her request, if not outright mocking. According to the police, the man had done nothing illegal or reprehensible, as writing poems or expressing explicit fantasies in text messages is not forbidden and is not punishable. Celeste could not provide evidence that Louis was following her and lurking near her home, so she was simply asked to leave the precinct and not hinder the police from catching real criminals. For another 6 months, Celeste continued to suffer from the relentless harassment of her former colleague. During workdays, she frequently noticed his car parked across the street from her office, and in the evenings, he would drive past her house several times. She constantly felt his gaze, which made her nervous and live in constant tension. In August 2020, Celeste approached the police again, this time providing photo and video evidence on her phone that Louis was indeed following her. A different officer took her statement, who took the situation more seriously and was even surprised at his colleague's indifference. He advised her to immediately go to court, where a restraining order was issued against the stalker, and he was notified that he could no longer call or approach her or try to contact her in any other way. Clearly, the man did not expect this turn of events, and he indeed disappeared from Celeste's sight for a few weeks. She was happy for the first time in a long time. She felt free and believed that the harasser would no longer bother her. However, her relief was premature. Less than a month later, she began receiving messages from unknown numbers in which Louis first pleaded and then demanded she retract her statement and remove the restraining order, as he believed it interfered with their romantic relationship. After receiving several messages, Celeste immediately went to the police as her pursuer had violated the restraining order and now had to face the consequences. The man was fined and warned that further violations would lead to much more severe measures, and if he did not leave the young woman alone, he could end up in jail. After this, the stalker did not make his presence known for almost 2 months, and the young woman decided that he had finally left her alone. In September 2020, Celeste met a young man named Chris Reedsdale. He was just a year older than her, and they quickly found they had many common interests, views on life, and goals. So a romantic relationship soon developed between them. Told her new boyfriend about the harassment from her former admirer, and confessed that although he had not made himself known for over a month, she still felt a sense of anxiety. Chris endeavored to surround his girlfriend with care and attention, doing everything to make her feel safe and worry-free. In early November, the young woman invited her new boyfriend to a family dinner to introduce him to her parents and brother. Celeste's choice was well received by her family. They immediately got along well, and her mother even joked that her girl was now in safe hands that would protect her. Calculated criminal or a man in need of treatment, the evidence against Sacco was irrefutable, further underscored by his long-term surveillance of the victim, knowing virtually everything about her. However, the final trigger for him was a photo the young woman posted on social media with her new boyfriend. After this, he went to a store, purchased a knife and a hammer, and under the cover of night went to Celeste's home to end her life. His actions were seen as deliberate, premeditated criminal activity, yet Louis's behavior was quite erratic, raising doubts about his mental stability. Notably, the man, nearly 39 years old, had never married, continued to live with his parents, had almost no friends, and never held a job for long. People described him as nervous and introverted with severe socialization issues. Additionally, Sacco had a biological brother who was serving a lengthy sentence for a criminal act at that time. A forensic psychiatric evaluation was ordered for the accused, and his attorney insisted that his client needed not imprisonment, but specialized treatment as he required professional help. This argument outraged and infuriated the victim's family, who feared that the cruel criminal might evade punishment. Psychiatric experts, after interviewing Lewis and analyzing his behavior, concluded that he did indeed suffer from some mental disorders. However, at the time of the crime, he was fully aware of his actions. Moreover, he had prepared for the crime in advance, planning the details. This meant that Sacco, despite his attempts to feign insanity, would undoubtedly have to face trial. The trial and sentencing. It was not until the autumn of 2023, 3 years after the tragic end of the young woman, that the criminal finally appeared in court. During this time, he repeatedly tried to prove that he was mentally ill and therefore could not be convicted of deliberate criminal activity. He spent most of this period in a psychiatric clinic. In the courtroom, Louis behaved calmly and detachedly, seemingly uninterested in the proceedings around him. He admitted his guilt but insisted that he had not intended to end the girl's life, merely to win her love. However, the jury unanimously found Sacco guilty on all counts. The defendant was sentenced to 36 years in prison, with the possibility of parole no sooner than after 30 years. Celeste's law, which was never passed. Celeste's parents repeatedly pointed out that their daughter had contacted the police as early as 2020, hoping for protection from Lewis. However, her complaint was not accepted because, according to the existing legislation, only attempts to physically contact the victim were considered harassment, while online stalking and phone harassment were not criminally punishable. Throughout the 3 years of preparing for the trial, the mother of the deceased young woman, together with professional lawyers and some activist organizations, worked on developing Celeste's law, which would have introduced criminal liability for stalking on social networks, through text messages and emails. Eguidiro believed that this would help protect many women and girls and prevent the tragic fate that befell her daughter. She aimed to achieve significant changes in the existing criminal legislation and directly approached the Legislative Commission of Victoria. The woman developed over 40 recommendations and amendments, but almost all of them were ultimately rejected. Investigations showed that in the vast majority of cases, online stalkers limit themselves to their invisible presence and do not seek to contact their victims in any other way. The amendments that were made only help to limit access to confidential information on social networks, and in cases of severe stalking involving threats, a restraining order could be issued similar to if the person were pursued in real life. However, there was still no criminal liability for such crimes. Currently, for such actions, a stalker might only receive a verbal warning, and upon repeated violations, they might be fined, though not always. Celeste's law has yet to be enacted. Subscribe for more amazing videos.